All right, 10:15 right on the dot. So we'll get started to respect everyone's time and let our late bloomers come in and shame them. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you for joining us, and kudos to you all for riding this out on the last day and the last session. So just want to take a moment to recognize the territory that we're on, the ancestral lands and the stolen lands. And I hope that you took time over the past 3 days for yourself. As I've learned from my Indigenous peers and colleagues and friends, that water is healing. And I am from Treaty 7, where there is no ocean and no water, just prairies and beautiful mountains. So it's been a joy to be surrounded by water and healing. And I hope that you're able to take some of that with you back to your work and respect those that have welcomed us here. Also like to thank our sponsors that made it possible for us to be here, and of course our panelists that have put in all their hard work to share their learnings with us. And sorry, my name's Tanya McCagerty, she, her pronouns, third gen Canadian, and work with Away Home Canada. So today we're going to talk about youth, which I think we all can agree on is the prevention and the solution to starting to end chronic homelessness. So we have the privilege of having three sets of panelists and presentations here with us. I'm not going to go too deep. I'm sure you all read why you're here and what we're going to talk about today, so I'll let them do their pieces. First up, we are going to have Greg and Dave from Newfoundland and talk about their youth rental, right? Supplement program, and then we'll move on from there. So thanks, and we'll do 20 minutes each and then 15 Q&A, so please write down any of those questions and as they go through. Greg, Dave.
That was loud. Good morning. So I'm going to kind of do something I probably shouldn't do, but I'm going to get everybody to take off their social justice lens, and I'm going to get you to close your eyes. Now, Friday morning, not probably a good thing to do, but if you can just close your eyes and you use your imagination for a second. You're a first-time homeowner. You just bought your house. You've saved up all your money for it. You bought a property that has a basement apartment. You're going to rent it out. Or if you're a seasoned kind of homeowner like myself, your parents have probably moved out of the basement or whatever, and you've just renovated your basement apartment. Put $10,000, $15,000 into it, renovating it. You're going to post it. You've got a list of people coming to view your apartment. First person shows up. A single mom, 2 kids. You're thinking, oh, okay, this is not too bad. Second people walk in. It's a new graduate nurse, just got first job as a nurse at a local hospital. Like, okay, this is pretty good. Your third person shows up, is an 18-year-old male, tattoos with a sport worker. Now, let's look at your clientele. Let's look at who you're going to rent to. Single mom, 2 kids. Basement apartment. They're going to be up all night crying. I'm not going to rent to them. How are they going to pay rent? Single mom. Second person, new grad. Ooh, perfect. Probably about a year or 2 of living there, probably working nights at the hospital, won't be around that great, or won't be around that much. Thirdly, you've got that 18-year-old that shows up with a sport worker, probably smelling like marijuana. Without answering, who are you going to rent to? With our program at Choices for Youth, that is one of the biggest issues we run into is when we go to view apartments with our youth, we have support workers there, we have single moms, and we just can't compete. So this presentation this morning is kind of about how I looked at that problem and tried to find a solution to it. Dave's going to talk about all the things that we had to go through to get it up and running, but I'm just going to give a little background about Choices for Youth and how we got the program up and running. So, Choices for Youth was a not-for-profit started in 1990 with 5 staff. Right now we're at about 130 staff, serving over about 1,500 young people a year. We've grown substantially. And if you give that in context to, look at like mainland cities, St. John's is kind of like, Mississauga and Brampton compared to to Toronto. Like, we're on the smaller side of things. At Choices, we offer a multitude of services. We've got our employment sector, which is our EESE, Education, Employment, Social Enterprise. So we provide educational opportunities to young people. We also provide job readiness skills for young people that are trying to look and get into the workforce, but also we also have our social enterprise. So those young people, once they do the work readiness program, they are almost guaranteed to go into an employment readiness for employment, where they can gain that tangible skills that they can put on a resume. So they have the educational component and the work experience as well. We have our health department. We have a medical clinic on site, so those young people don't have to go to an ER and wait for hours and hours. They can just come in and see one of our doctors or nurse practitioners that are on site, and it's free medical services. Our outreach program is basically the front door of Choices. Young people can show up at any time. We have our meals from 1 to 3 daily. We get about 60 people a day showing up for a meal. But that connection through the meal is really how we get young people in. We build trust through the meal. We do some outreach services, connect them with supports and services, and really start that journey of change for them. Our family division is our Mama Moments program. So they would be the people that really look after new moms, single moms, pre-postnatal, getting them really set up with housing and those supports that are definitely required. But kind of what we're here to talk about today is the housing programs. So we focus first and foremost on supporting youth to find stable housing. And we find that is the biggest thing, obviously, to reduce the risk and reduce crisis down the road. Because once you're stably housed, everything else can kind of fall into place. So we do have our shelter, our Rally Forward program, our Lily Building program, and most recently is the Soft Landing program, which is what Dave and I developed. So, this is just where we got some of our data. But we want to ensure that this is not about the justification and effectiveness, but about the rapid rehousing program that we developed. So it was created in October of 2021, and so that was when I did the program delivery or program development, and we really started in February of 2022. We found that youth did not meet the criteria if space was not available in our other housing programs, so they fell through the cracks. There was considerable wait lists, and young people, once they're on a wait list, they really kind of fell through the cracks. When their spot became available in the other supportive programs, we couldn't find them. They just, they're transient. Their numbers change more than other people's things. So we really had trouble finding them. So what we found was that by developing Soft Landing, we were able to kind of really look at housing young people very quickly, but also maintaining that contact. So when their spot became available in the more intensive programs, we were able to connect them with that support services that much faster without trying to find them. Also before Soft Landing, each program had its own referral process. So with that, social workers, community partners would cast a wide net by referring to all of our programs. So we get a lot of duplication, and our wait list was growing and growing and growing. So we created our own centralized referral process. So what that did was that we had one centralized, we would meet on Wednesdays and identify who was the best fit for what program. And we would really look at, okay, if this spot is full, how can we as Soft Landing maintain connections? Because sometimes they just need a place to live. And if we were able to successfully find a place to live, we found that their level of need decreased because they were stabilized. So that intensive supports that they were probably referred for weren't really required as we kind of work with them to kind of stabilize just with a bit of a light touch approach. I think I just went way too fast. All right. So, strangely enough, as I was developing the program, St. John's was hit with one of the unprecedented housing crises. It was almost near vacancy rates for our young people. We had young people, as I just mentioned, we go to housing viewings, as you can see here in the picture. It wasn't like a set time. They had an open house style where people would literally line up around the corner waiting to see a one-bedroom apartment for $1,200 a month. And, as my staff were there with our young people, they'd be talking to the people around them, and there would be young families, there would be professionals, there'd be master students, all competing, and even the young people are coming back and going, why am I here? How am I going to compete? The fact that they have, they understood that I can't compete in this market, it was really discouraging. We're like, no, how do you go? No, you still have a chance. Like, realistically, we knew it wasn't going to work. We were a little bit successful, but not to the extent that I was happy with. So with that, at the same time, Newfoundland has come home years. I don't know if other provinces have it, but anybody who had a shed, a closet, was like, hey, I got an Airbnb. So everybody from across the country, most people from Calgary would know, hey, there's Newfoundlanders living here. They're going home for 2 weeks to party and have a come home year. So in the middle of that, everybody turned their shed, whatever they had, into an Airbnb, charging about $200 a night, just so relatives and friends could come home. So that's, if you look at the picture with all those purple dots, that's all the Airbnbs that popped up during that time frame. And somebody talked about that on the first day, was about the Airbnbs taking away from long-term rentals. This is exactly what we're talking about. It was a money-making, because they had friends and family, and they could charge $200 a night and get it. So on top of that, we had our government, for right or for wrong or whatever, there's no judgment. We started to take in a lot of people from Ukraine. So that contributed to also trying to find housing available for our youth. So again, it's one of those things where any housing that was there was taken up. We just left people in shelters. And our shelter system in St. John's, we have public and private. So our Choices for Youth shelter is a 9-bed for male identifying youth. It's run well, it's clean, it's organized. Then you've got the private shelters that are charging about $200 a night, that are rat infested, have never been cleaned. They provide meals, which is literally a hot dog on, it's deplorable conditions. So you see that we do have tent encampments in St. John's as well. And as a result of people just like, I don't want to spend a night in a shelter, for that simple fact. So, what do we do? Sorry, not technologically. So one of the biggest barriers is that we didn't have appropriate, affordable housing for our young people. So as I mentioned, we were struggling to find apartments for our young people. And, if young people were finding a place, they were going into bed-sitting rooms, they're going into kind of slum places where the landlords were just there for a profit. There was very deplorable conditions. And our young people said, we're also living with people that are in active addictions, active mental health issues. They didn't feel safe there. As a young person living with somebody in their 50s or 60s, it was very hard for them to feel comfortable and safe there. The other thing is that when they did move out, they didn't have those adequate supports, which is something we're talking about in conjunction with housing. We need the supports to maintain stability. So all that in contribution ended or perpetuated the cycle of homelessness. So I'm going to do this right. Oh my God. Oh my God. All right. So we started the head leasing program. And so I developed the head leasing program to be the property manager for private landlords. So what I basically did was I kind of developed a program of, we're going to be the property managers. We're the ones that are going to be doing the, the check-ins with them. We're the ones that are going to be paying the rent to the landlord. So there's no kind of risk on that part. When I approached them, I approached it as a business model, because that is what the homeowners or the landlords are looking at. They're doing this to make money. So I approached it as a business type model where I was like, listen, your rent is going to be paid. You're not going to be short on rent. We're going to have a damage deposit within 24 hours. We're going to do monthly check-ins. We're going to have professional cleaners go in once a month and do your common cleaning. If there's any minor damages come in, we're going to look after it. The only thing you really need to do is if the washer breaks or if there's a leak in the ceiling, you look after it. Some of the first landlord I met with, he was like, "You're doing what now? You're going to look after everything for me. I'm just going to sit back and collect my rent." I'm like, "Yep." And he was like, "Okay, how do we sign up?" So they didn't see any risk on their part. So it was fantastic in that sense. So on July 6th, I did meet with that landlord. It was a 5-bedroom house, heat, light included. And I looked at it, it had 125 views on the ad within 5 minutes. I called the landlord, I said, "Listen, I want to rent your entire property." And again, he was like, "What?" I said, "Yep." I gave him my spiel of how I'm going to do it. And he was like, "That sounds really good." And so we went and viewed the place. I saw it online. I really didn't care what it looked like. I was desperate to find housing for young people. Went and viewed it, signed the rental agreement that day. So that was July 6th. July 7th, we signed the rental agreement. July 15th, I had 3 young people move in, and we had another 2 move in with the following week. So we went from low impact of securing private market rentals to all of a sudden I had 5 young people housed. Why? Because we were the gatekeepers. We were guaranteeing rent. We were not choosing between that nursing graduate. We're not choosing between anything. We were like, this young person deserves a right to housing. We provided it to them. Our second property came about a month and a half later. Again, I saw an ad for a 3-bedroom upstairs, 2-bedroom downstairs, and I approached the landlord and said, "I want to rent your entire house." Gave him my spiel, and he was like, he was a new homeowner. "I don't know about this, but I like it." So I gave him the contact number for our first landlord, had a conversation. Within 10 minutes later, he called me back, said, "Yep, how do I sign up?" We had another 5 young people housed. The third property came about the same way. Our fourth and fifth properties were actually cold calls, people hearing about what I was doing and contacting me. Were they thinking that they were going to help solve homelessness? No. They saw dollar bills of rent being paid, no risk on their end, and somebody's going to look after for them. So that's how it started. It really snowballed in that sense. Did I really care that they were using me for their profit? No, I was getting young people housed. I didn't care. So that's really how Soft Landing came about. Everything that we did was within, we weren't making a profit. We were literally getting enough in rent to cover the rent, cover the any damages that might occur, and the cleaners. So sounds easy, sounds like a great idea. I'm going to pass it over to Dave now, who's going to tell you that it's not.
Hi. So as Greg said, this was a really kind of unique solution to a problem we were facing. But I feel, when I present here, I always like to give the full story, because I think we're not going to be able to have a very good conversation about this, or perhaps people taking it away, if we're just giving you all the great parts about it. Because I call it an imperfect solution to a complicated problem. So some of the things, 5 things we took away from it, and we're still in the process of evaluating this program, and we'll see after we get, this year, we look at some of our feedback from it. But the issues were financial. We had some issues with neighborhood relations, Tenancy Act, of course. We have one in Newfoundland that we have to follow. Property maintenance was a big issue for us. And finally, staff-youth relations. And I'll quickly go through them, but the staff-youth relations one is probably the one that we struggle with the most. But financially, I won't lie, we have funding dollars to help this program. All our spaces are currently rented, I believe, or pretty close to, but there is transition times. And like Greg said, we have to pay that rent every month. We could have open spaces, so we had to have some funding money there to cover those spaces when we weren't having rent coming in open spots. There's turnovers cost, obviously. Rent and utilities were still paid even if rooms were empty. And then on occasion, we did have youth who couldn't pay rent. So we are not those landlords who were going to kick them out because they don't pay rent. We keep them housed. But again, that's a cost that we actually had to consider when we were budgeting. Neighbor relations, it started out, some of them were a bit tough because there was a lot of misconceptions about what we're doing. We had some people go to the media about how we're running group homes or halfway houses or these types of things. We're not. We were just helping youth get into the housing market and house them. It wasn't a 24/7 program, but luckily we were able to talk to a lot of the people in the neighborhood. We actually they had a neighborhood watch. We invited them down to our organization, had a really long conversation with them. They had some legitimate concerns, but we were also able to work with them to make sure that the youth living there were part of that community as well. But I won't say it was, there are some challenges with that still. One of the biggest things is the Tenancy Act. We are essentially landlords. We have to follow the Tenancy Act. I'm sure it's similar across the country, but if in some of our programs, if people aren't meeting program expectations, then they can exit the program. Here, they have the same right as any other somebody renting. So we have to follow the Tenancy Act, which can slow things down. We've had to go to the Tenancy Board a couple of times. So that's something to be aware of if you're thinking about a similar program. Property maintenance. So that Greg is now a pretty good handyman. Because it's something you have to, like you said, if there's a broken door, or if there's a lock needs changed, or there's a window, where all of a sudden we have our support staff now becoming, having to be able to do those repairs. So we have some in-house maintenance in our programmings, but it wasn't enough. So we're having to do a lot more work on that side of things to keep those homes and to keep the landlords happy. This is the one I really want to talk to because I know that I'm running out of time, but this is perhaps the biggest issue we're finding with this program. Because now that we're landlords, we have our support staff who are trying to develop strong, healthy relationships with the youth so they can help them and support them. And then they are also turning around saying we might have to evict you, or we might have to, address other issues in that home. So it's a real struggle to be that support person, and then that same support person or support team, in Greg's team, are then the people who are actually fighting with over unpaid rent or possible evictions, because unfortunately we have had to evict some youth. So that really, it blurred the lines of what those support workers were doing. So one of the responses we're looking at that is we're actually trying to come up with a plan now to develop like a property maintenance and ownership kind of team with in-choices. So those support staff, we're really there to support those youth and help them through, getting their own homes. They're not the same people who are turning around and saying, sorry, you have to leave, or sorry, you've caused damage, now we need to ask you to leave. So that's if you're thinking about programs like this, that's something to really think hard about. Like, are staff going to be doing all of it, or should you separate it? I think if we could do it perfectly, I think we would separate it and have a property maintenance team that's completely separate from our support staff. So some of the outcomes, as Greg mentioned, so we have 10 homes added to our housing stock. So those are homes that we, like Greg said, that we control the youth that go into those homes. So that's 5 private market landlords. But we've also developed a really strong relationship with our city, their affordable housing team. So they've actually given us three of their units. The rent is so much lower than the private market. They also understand it is an affordable housing team at the city. And we actually got some smaller, like 2-bedroom ones, which was a need. So that's been a really good relationship with the city. I think if we want to do it perfectly, we would do it with all city units because they're just a lot easier to deal with. And they understand what we're trying to do because they're trying to get people housed as well. When we give these speech to our funders, we talk about there is savings to government because if we can get youth staying in these homes, they're not staying in emergency shelters. They're not going to the private shelter, which is costing the government quite a bit of money per night. So there is some savings for government, and we've had 36 youth have been provided a safe, affordable home. So that's a very positive thing. Like I said, it's not all perfect, but we are happy to say that our really long wait list that we had is slowly getting working our way through it. I just mentioned, I'll just go over really quickly, the government partnerships at this point in our pilot of this program, they seem to be the best, and I think we would like to, if we could, get away from the private landlords and all our units be with affordable housing with either the city or the province. as I said, the government have more experience working in affordable housing, and also the government's not profit-driven in the same way lands are. So our rent is, I wouldn't say half, but it's considerably less what the youth pay if they're in a city housing unit rather than a private landlord. We'll end it there because I know other people are here, but my next slide is our questions, but I think we're going to wait till the end for the questions. So thank you very much.
I'll introduce you while you pull it up. I'll just do the quick intro while you get your slides ready.
All right, I'll pretend.
Thank you. I appreciate your honesty and sharing your learnings with us and the importance of relationships, whether it was word of mouth or those government relationships that help you do all the things that you did. So next up, we have Sam and Marty, who are going to share their workshop on Be Angry, developed by youth for youth.
All right.
Yeah, that's
great.
you.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Marty Daly. I'm a youth engagement specialist at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health in Toronto. And previous to that, I was a peer support worker at Loft Community Services with Sam over here, who will be doing the brunt of the presentation. So my foreshadowing is we're kind of the weird middle child of this panel. So we have all the fun stuff and we're going to be a little bit loud. So you might have seen on the seats, there's some postcards, there's some books, there's comics. Take those home, please. Spread them out. We love that. Oh, I don't know how to use the slide. Okay. Thank you. Help, Sam.
It's not updating? Oh. All right, stop looking, everyone. I guess we have to restart.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Sam actually makes the PowerPoints when we work together, so that's why. All right, so where did the By Youth for Youth project start? It started as a spin-off project of something really close to my heart known as the Housing Outreach Project Collaborative, which started around 2015. And so the Housing Outreach Project Collaborative is quite special because it provides wraparound supports for youth that have been recently housed between 1 and 364 days. So wraparound supports means case management, peer support, psychological support, as well as the opportunity to do social outings. And so the social outing bit wasn't a part of the original plan. However, with my own lived experience, I was like, it's summer. What do youth do in the summer if they're not homeless? Usually they're trying to get a summer job, right? Can we give our youth a summer job? Sean said yes. That's Sean. And so what happened was we had this question of what would you have liked to know before this experience, what was really important. And so the young people came up with this cool product called the My Guide, which I'll start throwing out to you when I step down and Sam comes to do our presentation. But the primary objective of HOPC is to foster a healthier transition for young people that goes beyond just a housing first approach and provides opportunities for them to actually grow and evolve and, be young, be under 25 and learn something new. So I mentioned that this project's been around since 2015, and so we've had a long runway of trying it in different contexts. So initially, we had our pilot study, which has a comic book, it has a My Guide, which is a bullet journal, and after that, we extended up to Thunder Bay, actually, and worked with a group called Daliko Anishinaabe Health, and HOPC's been permanently funded up there by the city of Thunder Bay, which was quite a huge accomplishment. After that, they wanted to get more creative, and so we connected with Covenant House International, who connected us to a group in Managua, Nicaragua, far away from here, and it was quite quite the challenge to actually build those connections. However, the products that were made were very unique to each community. So in Toronto, the youth said, we want a bullet journal. That would be very helpful. When we went to Thunder Bay, they said, we want something for the youth that are actually flying to Thunder Bay as their first time in a big city because they don't know where the resources are. We want them to be connected to their culture. So they brought in the grandfather teachings. They made us, I would wear it, but it's really warm in here, this cool logo with the sweater, and they all have these as well. And so with the Nicaragua team, theirs was actually, it really blew me away. They had a street theater piece, which they performed for their parents and community, which actually resulted in a lot of them going home after, so the family reconnection was really paramount. They also made a reggaeton music video. I know, and if you watch it, it'll bring you to tears. That's all I could tell you. It's quite powerful. And amongst that, they had a methodological guide for other service providers who wanted to do the same program. So the variety of products is really quite vast. And so in 2022, we had York Region join us. Some folks are in the room from there. You may have seen their presentation on Monday. York Region had two projects, one known as the Queer Agenda, which was more so about learning about 2S LGBTQ plus symbols, learnings, just an entry level for anybody who was like, I just want to know, I don't understand this. And it was done as a drop-in style. And then we also had a tenancy rights video, which was also done by all the young people. I won't speak to that because I'm sure they already spoke to it a few days ago. And lastly, earlier this year, we did have a knowledge translation event where we did not only workshops, we did fireside chat. It was a really wonderful day, and also gave our folks a chance to really big themselves up in front of a different audience. So when it comes to the By Youth for Youth expansion, there's a few principles and a few methods behind our madness with this project. So the first thing is that each community is very unique, right? So what works for Toronto won't necessarily work for Newfoundland, just as an example. What works for Black youth may not work for Indigenous youth, etc. So it's really important that each By Youth for Youth project is grounded in that community, and the youth leadership and peer leadership comes from that community as well. And so the focus is really how do we go beyond service as usual? How do we look at developing the whole person? How do we give them opportunities to actually see who they could be if given the chance and a paycheck and respect? So some of the principles behind this, these are taken from something that I made called the LiveX Charter. Lived experience is not limited to providing anecdotal evidence. It's not just storytelling. People with lived experience are not only skilled, but they are willing to learn if given the opportunity. We like to take a strengths-based approach, so not everybody wants to be a facilitator, not everybody wants to be a speaker, not everybody wants to write a book, right? That's a big piece of work. So it really is a pick your own adventure and follow where the youth say they want to develop the skills. Let them try it on. And the last bit is that youth can lead youth with guidance. So my role now that it's been almost 10 years, is to be more of a coach with the peer leads that we have. And so with that, I'll hand it to Sam to talk about her program. And I'll be handing some stuff out around the room as well.
Thank you. Hi. I'm Sam. I'm a peer support worker at Loft Community Services under Marty's coaching abilities, which is fantastic. And I help build Be Angry, by Fi workshop around demystifying anger. So the 7-week program is based in Toronto, Ontario in person at our Loft Community Services drop-in. It's all about the stigma that revolves around young people, especially homeless youth, with anger as a very key emotion that young people feel. How I kind of built this workshop was very much inspired by my own lived experience with anger and homelessness. As a young child and constantly couch hopping with my mom and on my own as a teenager, I was very angry at the situation I was living in. And I found my anger to be very core to who I was now transitioning as an adult and learning to suppress it for so much of my life. As I worked in HOPC, I learned that a lot of young people also felt the same way and also went through that same experience as me. And I wanted to build this workshop to kind of showcase and have a place to process anger as a whole, saying that it's a valid emotion and it's totally understandable to feel it in this economy especially. So what Be Angry is all about, how it's kind of implemented. It has different topics around anger and us processing it together in that space. With each one, we talk about kind of like a check-in style. So we say our names, preferred pronouns, a little bit of an icebreaker, and we kind of use our temperature scoreboard to kind of say how angry we are in the moment, kind of keep that keep that identified for us and check it in. We do group guidelines as well, which we curated with the young people in the early stages of Be Angry, so making it as comfortable in the space for them to be angry. And we talked about kind of a psychoeducational aspect of anger, so the differences between partnering emotions like shame, guilt, and so on. With this, we, as facilitators as well, Marty was part of helping me, we were also vulnerable with our emotions as well in the space, and we utilized that and made sure young people were aware that we are taking the same risks in this space as with our anger together. Other implemented stuff that we added to Be Angry is our on-call system with psychologists. Luckily, we've never used it, so that's a great thing, but it was nice for young people to know that as psychologists are there in the background in the event that they feel so intense with their emotion and they feel it's a distraction to the workshop. We added toolkits as well for our emotions, so adding on therapeutic skills on how do we deal with our anger and utilizing different types of therapy skills, not just kind of the be-all of like anger management that there is. So you'll see in some of your postcards, this is a very powerful quote, and when I was exploring my own anger, I discovered Dr. Leslie Greenberg, who was a founder of emotion-focused therapy. And if anyone knows Dr. Greenberg, he actually founded this for couples therapy, and that he encouraged folks to act onto their partner and their emotion in front of them. But he found it was very useful for individuals to also act out their own emotions. And he claimed that anger is one of the most socially undesirable emotion, and it's often confounded with aggression. For young people, that is a huge stigma, and the perception of being homeless adds on this field of aggressive or teenage rebellion vibe that young people face. Anger is also seen as needing to be in control. Suppressed anger is a significant problem, and people need to access this exclaimed anger to overcome depression and anxiety. As a young person who experienced homelessness, suppression was the only way to survive, because when you experience that outburst, you risk a lot of consequences as a homeless youth. That can mean losing your bed, it can mean losing your job, and unfortunately, young homeless people don't have the luxury of a second chance. So I use this as kind of like our motto, as we need to understand our suppressed anger to move forward. And so some of the topics we talked about, in the early stages, we did the foundations of anger, kind of setting the groundwork of what this whole workshop's about, building our group guidelines, building what the difference is between anger and other emotions, and how they can reach out to people in the event that they feel very intense with their anger. We talk about anger management versus emotion-focused therapy, and we talk about the benefits and risks of both, finding their own little toolkit, building off of each skill, and so on. And then we moved on into processing it and expression of anger. So whether that's storytelling, mindful movement, activating our senses, and so on. And then in the end, we kind of did a little forgiveness of our anger, finding that it's actually a beautiful emotion, or at least I think it's a beautiful emotion, and kind of saying our anger is telling us something, it's giving us a message, and that's okay, let it go. And we celebrated in the end with a graduation day, hanging out at the beach, having fun, all those things. Yeah, so a great example of some of the topics we picked, and yes, I love like cartoons, so that's just like the slide we use for them as well. So we talked about emotion-focused therapy. The definition of it is correcting and understanding our emotional and processing problems by analyzing our interactions with other varying emotions like shame and guilt. Because anger is never on its own. It's actually partnered with a lot of different emotions. For some, it's shame, guilt, sadness, whatever, and we kind of use that as our goal in the Be Angry workshop, is saying our anger is telling us something, and it's partnered with another emotion. Let's try to identify that and give it some space in the place, with the goal of accepting and transforming reactions as well. So that's Be Angry, but did some benefits and challenges to be angry. In the very beginning stages, we actually did a pre-workshop focus group. So we asked some young folks of HOPC, what would they like to see in their interest level with anger? We found that a lot of young people were very interested in anger, and they felt that this was probably the first time they've heard of a space bringing that into that emotion. It's not really a common thing you see around for services and resources to talk about. We utilized our Loft Community Services, so for a drop-in format, it was already a built-in youth-friendly space, so a lot of young people went there already for social drop-ins, for DBT or other therapeutics group. And the timing was a perfect time on a Friday evening. A lot of young people felt like they were holding in their anger on like a Tuesday night, and they're like, okay, I can go on Friday and talk about it with this group of people, so it's a perfect time. So that was a great benefit to be angry. In terms of familiar location and staff, again, it's a familiar place for them. For me and Marty, we are very out of knowing as a peer worker, so we come in with that lived experience, and we are very open with that and sharing our own experiences with young people. They found that to be helpful and keep the space safe and comfortable, knowing that we understand a little bit of their experience as well. Other benefits, psychoeducation, a variety of activities. Again, keeping in that skill-based learning is our key. Some folks found that very helpful with their own anger, and others felt like processing in that space was also just as beneficial. And again, youth-friendly environment was our key goal for making sure that everyone was comfortable with staff and clients around them. Now, I don't call them challenges. I like saying blunders because challenges, just because in chess, blunders is like, it doesn't mean the game's over, you can still win. Couple blunders, unexpected life events for youth, because homelessness, and especially for young people when they transition outside of homelessness, there's not to say that they can't go back. And unfortunately, some of our young youth had lost their apartment or lost their stable housing and had to kind of prioritize some things into their lives. This was not a main focus, and we were totally understandable about that, but that was one of those challenges that came up. Another one is HOPC-specific programming. So because this was kind of its first cohort, we wanted to offer it to HOPC members. I would love to spread it out, to open it up outside of HOPC members, because I think the perspective of young people would be fantastic. I definitely want to add on more of the stigmatized topics that come up as a Black woman. I feel like the stereotype of that comes in, and young people feel the same way, just as much as trans youth as well. So opening up the perspective and intersectionality would be fantastic for this group, because anger is not just for homeless youth. And the different journeys with anger and shame and guilt. So for a lot of our young people are in different journeys, and finding their own level of those journeys were very different from their peers, their facilitators, and that could be a challenge for some people. Other challenges or things I would change, just more activities for young people to try. Wanted to do more boxing and movement, mindful movement, elements of EFT and coping skills. A lot of young people advise and kind of like the idea of learning the differences between these emotions and how to work them through their life, how to handle it during those crucial moments. For my numbers people, here's the stats. We did a lot of questionnaires near the end of each workshop and each session. My favorite one is kind of seeing how interested they were in the topic of anger, with a huge majority, 57.1%, saying very interested. There was not a single person that felt they were uncomfortable in the space with their anger and wanted to continue on the conversation in that space. So these are kind of like my wins of what great things we did with Be Angry. And last, the testimonials, because I feel like that's where it's most powerful. A lot of people saying laid back attitude, understanding, learning the formal definitions of guilt and shame, and that I was able to smash the object. I feel like I should give context to that. For our Forgiving Your Anger session, we actually did this Japanese art form called Kitsuki vases. If anyone knows what they are, you smash a ceramic bowl or plate or cup, and then you use this glitter glue to put it back together again. Kind of shares this idea, and we kind of put into this metaphor is that anger feels like it's breaking something, but it can be repaired at the end, right? We strengthen a relationship through conflicts almost. So a lot of people felt very invigorated from smashing the object first and then putting it back together. And lastly, ending it off again with liking the activity and learning more about guilt and shame. Another win, would they attend this group again? 100% said yes. So definitely encourages me to keep this going. Wanted to see it go through. I think anger is a wonderful emotion. But yeah, let's be angry. And if you,
Yeah.
Dan,
No, don't leave. We're not
know.
done. We have one more thing to say. So I think part of what made Be Angry special this time is Sam has like a deep interest in psychology, you know, and of course these journeys are really personal. So I think it's really cool that Sam was able to not only put her interest into this project, but also learn something new, apply something new, and show that the lived experience space really is quite amazing as an asset to expand what our traditional medical model looks like. Now we're done. Thank you.
And she did it with a net promoter score of 100%. I like numbers. Yeah. Congratulations. Next up, we have Tally from 360 Kids, who's going to talk to us about Night Stop, preventing youth homelessness through community housing.
Thank you.
You're good?
Oh, how do I go back to end slideshow?
Yeah, I think maybe let's just exit. Again.
Is it in here?
Mhm.
Just cue me at 10. Okay, good. Good morning, everyone. As mentioned, I'm Tally. I'm the manager of the Night Stop program at 360 Kids. I think before I get into Night Stop, just to give a background on a little bit of what 360 Kids does. We're an organization that's been around since 1989. We serve youth who are either already experiencing homelessness or at risk of experiencing homelessness. And we do so with programs and wraparound supports that we kind of divide into 4 pillars, which are housing, employment, health and well-being, and education. To date, we serve around 3,500 youth per year, and Night Stop is one of the programs that falls under the housing pillar, and that's what I'm going to be talking to you about here today. I want to invite you all, while I'm talking about Night Stop, to envision what it would look like in your community. If there are gaps that it would fill, that's what I'd invite you to do with it. But yeah, I've really been looking forward to have this discussion with you all. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the next 20 minutes, hopefully. So what is Night Stop? So Night Stop is a community hosting program where volunteers who are vetted and trained in the community offer up a bedroom in their home to young people who have managed physical or mental health needs. Sorry, can't see it here. Sorry. It's a temporary solution to fill in gaps that we started noticing in some of our shelter systems and emergency housing programs. Youth can stay with the host for a maximum of six weeks. With that being said, our average stays typically last between 3 and 5 days. Weekends typically tend to be our busiest time. And then the other thing that I would say, it's very rare that a young person stays with the same host for the entire 6-week period. So they'll often stay with a combination of hosts while they're staying with us. A common misconception about Night Stop is that it's a new program. It's kind of a double-edged answer. It's new in Canada, but it's not new. if that kind of makes sense. So it was created in the 1980s by DePaul in the UK, and to date there are 27 different Night Stop providers across Scotland, Wales, Ireland, and England. 360 Kids is the sole international Night Stop provider. And I think we have a really interesting perspective when it comes to the program, because we are both an organization who's been accredited to deliver the program, but we are the sole accrediting body in Canada to train new organizations to become providers. So I think that really puts us in an interesting place to speak on the program's successes. We were accredited in 2017, but we began delivering the program in 2018. To date, we've seen a lot of successes, and the really great thing about Night Stop is that we've seen success in really massive metropolitan cities like London, England, but we've also had success in York Region, Ontario, which has been described as semi-urbanized. So in the south of the region, you have areas that really look like Toronto, but in the north, you have regions that have limited access to public transportation and see a lot of the challenges that a lot of our rural communities in Canada face. So what I would say is that it doesn't matter whether you are in the Maritimes, whether you're in a rural community, the data shows that the program's worked, and later on in the presentation I'll share some of that data. So why? The why. Why does Night Stop work? Why does Night Stop fill in gaps when it comes to serving youth who are facing homelessness? Well, I think the first thing is, it seems obvious, but it has to be stated that there's no one-size-fits-all solution to homelessness, right? The needs, the supports, and the wraparound supports that each young person needs, they vary, they're unique, right? And I think that's been a common theme throughout the conference over the past 3 days, is really addressing the individual needs of each youth that we're trying to serve. But I think the better way to answer the why it works, or why we believe it's effective, is to answer why we turned to it in the first place. So I want to take you back to 2016. So obviously as an organization, we've been around since 1989, but 2016 was a really exciting year for us. We opened our youth hub, which our CEO often reminds me didn't just open overnight. It was 15 years in the making, but we opened our youth hub, we moved our drop-in center into the facility, and we opened an emergency housing program as well as transitional housing. But as a frontline staff at the time, I was really blown away by the need for emergency housing. Obviously, we knew it existed, but I'm not sure that we really grasped how massive the need was. So we had 14 beds, we continue to have 14 beds, but that youth could access for 4 months at a time. And I think the thing that blew us away at the beginning was the phone ringing all day. So this was before we moved to a central intake model. We were responsible for taking calls and creating wait lists, but our emergency housing filled up right away, and it remained full. And the need for emergency housing was so great that our youth would memorize our shift changes, because they were so afraid that their name would get lost on the wait list. So our volume of calls would increase at between 7 and 8 in the morning, 3 to 4 in the afternoon, and 10 to 11 at nighttime. And it blew us away because we weren't advertising what time shifts started and finished. They knew, and their need was so great that they memorized it. And that was the first thing that blew us away on the front lines. And then the second thing that blew us away was how unique the needs of each individual youth were. So in our emergency housing, we would have one room being filled by a young person that could be in their early 20s and had been in a cycle of shelter stays and sleeping on the streets for 6 years, with multiple stints in correctional facilities, that the other youth would look at as a veteran, someone who knew what it took to survive on the streets or to survive in the shelter system, right? And then next door to them, we would have a young person in their late teens who had never spent a night out on the streets, never imagined that they would need a shelter. And the only reason they were with us was because their parents had discovered that they were gay and that home was no longer an option for them. And then we would have in the room next to them someone who had only been in the country for 30 days. And all they had known of Canada was sleeping out on the streets. And I remember a colleague at the time coming to me and expressing her immense concern for how vulnerable some of the youth were that were in our emergency housing, how worried she was. And she would often say to me, she would say, I wish there was something else. I wish there was something else that we could put this kid in for the meantime while we figured something out long term, right? And I think that's the answer to why Night Stop is so successful and why we think it's so necessary in combating youth homelessness. And in this experience, we made a few conclusions. The first one that we made was that our emergency housing supports within York Region in Ontario weren't enough. So the beds were always going to be full. At the time in 2016, we had 40 emergency beds that were available for young people experiencing homelessness in York Region. And it was estimated at the time that 329 people were either at risk of experiencing homelessness, in precarious housing, or sleeping on the streets every night in York Region, of which just over 100 were the young people between the ages of 16 to 26 that we were serving. So we realized that we needed alternative options, we needed preventative options, and we needed, innovative projects that would fit not only the massive crisis that we were facing, but be able to serve youth on a unique individual level. The second conclusion that we made was that we wanted to support individuals and young people facing homelessness before they ever had to face a night on the street, or before they ever had to enter the shelter system, or we wanted to find them early. We wanted to find them early in their housing crisis. And the last conclusion we made was that we wanted to offer an option to kids who would benefit from time away from home. So not every kid needed a 4-month emergency housing stay. Not every kid needed to be put into transitional housing or independent housing. Some kids needed a shorter time away and help from our staff at 360 to mediate the problems that were happening at home so that we could return them to home or return them to a family or natural support, right? And so our senior leadership team at 360 Kids identified Night Stop as a solution, and we started delivering the program in 2018. And we got to work. We built our volunteer roster. We really got the word out there through social media, through our school board system, and through community partners to ensure that kids knew that there was an option for them. And we created what I like to call the Night Stop path. So some of this stuff is going to seem very obvious, but there's some stuff here that is vital to making community hosting work. So obviously, we wanted to ensure that any young person who couldn't return home or who had to leave home knew that Night Stop existed. So we were really aggressive with our outreach. We continue to be really aggressive with outreach, with marketing, and with advertising. And then we wanted to ensure that once they submitted a referral or were referred by a community partner, that we would answer the referral and complete the risk assessment within the same day, which for me is the most vital part of our program, to be able to answer the same day. After that, what we would do is contact our volunteer roster and see who was available. Whether it was many hosts that were available or just one host, we create profiles of each host and we provide it to the young person and we empower them to decide where they think their most successful stay is. And in the case if it's just one host family, we still provide the profile because it alleviates a lot of the stress and anxiety around staying with a stranger if they can learn a little bit about the family and actually take a look at what the accommodations would look like. And I think once we place them in with the host home, we'll do a warm transfer, so we'll be there with them. But then the really important work starts. Our family and natural support team or our Night Stop team will work in collaboration with the youth to find a long-term solution. So eligibility for Night Stop. What youth are we taking into Night Stop? So in our Night Stop, we take youth who are aged between 16 and 26. There are night stops in the UK that go older than this. We chose 26 because it matches the age demographics of the youth that we serve in our other programming. The youth we serve have managed physical and mental health needs, keeping in mind that they're not staying with youth workers, they're not staying with social workers, they're staying with volunteers in the community. So we ask that the youth have managed physical and mental health needs. They can have diagnoses, they can be taking medication, but we just ask that symptoms and their overall health is in a state where it's managed. The other thing that we ask is that they abstain from drugs and alcohol and other substances for the duration of their stay. This does not include prescription medication, of course, and that they not have a history of arson, sexual assault, or violent crime, and that they're willing to work towards a more permanent solution with us or with our family and natural support team, which we are, as we move forward with Night Stop, we are pairing our family and natural support services more and more with Night Stop because they really do go hand in hand. And then the youth also commit to following our program rules, but also the host's house rules. Now, with that being said, all hosts submit their house rules to the Night Stop workers so that we can ensure that they fit with our organizational culture and morals and with what we're trying to do with Night Stop. So who uses Night Stop? So since 2018, 20% of our referrals have been to us LGBTQ+, or have identified as members of the community. 65% of our referrals are BIPOC youth, and 45% are under the age of 18. 15% are newcomers to Canada, having arrived after 2018. And with this being said, in our last 2 reporting quarters, just over 30% of our referrals have been newcomers to Canada. 95% of the youth identify as having mental health challenges, and 98% of our youth disclose to us that there's been a family breakdown in the home. When a youth uses Night Stop, we ensure that they have adequate clothing, especially in the winter. We provide toques, hats, mitts, scarves. Last year was one of the first times we were able to provide winter jackets, winter boots. In the summer, we still provide clothing, but the other thing that we provide is accessibility to transportation the next day. So we'll provide them with bus tickets. In York Region, we have a Presto card system, so we'll load their Presto card, but we'll also map out their routes for the next day. We want to ensure that although housing may be a crisis for them, that there's other things in their networks and in their lives that are working, extracurriculars, part-time jobs, their social life, and we want them to remain as connected to it as possible. So we'll map routes with them for the next day. We always provide a warm transfer for the youth to the host home when it's their first time staying with a new host. And we check out with the youth after. We'll do a tour of the accommodations and ensure that the youth feels safe and comfortable in the home. And then last but not least, we empower the youth to choose if and when they engage with the host. We encourage them to engage socially and partake in what's going on in the home, but ultimately we leave that decision up to them. What our hosts provide. So our hosts provide a cooked breakfast and dinner and a packed lunch. They also provide a private room, so it's not a shared space to sleep in. They provide the youth with their own room with a door in it. And then they'll also provide access to a washroom so that they can shower, so that they can clean up. All hosts are given by the Night Stop team a welcome kit that includes many of the clothing items that we mentioned, but also toiletries and hygiene products. Our hosts will also provide young people with access to the laundry. So it'll be they could do it as a kind of a life skills exercise where they'll show them how to do the laundry. If the youth already knows how, they can do it by themselves in the laundry room. Or if the youth has had a particularly difficult day, the host will take it on themselves and do the laundry for them. And they're also offered a spot at the dinner table, right? Like a listening ear, come join us. They can participate in whatever the family's got going on in the home that night. Eligibility to be a host. So all hosts must provide a youth, as mentioned before, with a spare bedroom. They all have to undergo our application form and process. They have to provide 2 references to the Night Stop team. We prefer that one be professional and one be personal. But they do have to provide those references to us. They then complete their own risk assessment. That's very similar to the youth risk assessment. And if that goes positively, we visit the home and do an assessment to make sure that the home meets all quality standard regulations for Night Stop. Anyone over the age of 18 in the home that will be there when the guest is there has to provide us a police vulnerable sector check. And we also ask that hosts have managed physical and mental health needs, so they sign off on a waiver with us in regards to that. Once all of this is completed, the entire application process goes through our panel committee that votes on it. If they are voted and gain approval, they complete a one-day in-person training as well as several online trainings through modules. Again, anyone over the age of 18 that will be in the home is completing this training. So now my favorite slide, our successes. So keeping in mind, we were accredited in 2017, but we began delivering in 2018. And from 2020 to 2022, the program was really hampered by COVID-19 and volunteers not feeling comfortable with having strangers in their homes. So we really didn't place much during the pandemic. So really this is 3 years of data from 2018 to 2020 and from 2022 till now. We have placed 80 unique individuals between the ages of 16 to 26 for a total of 922 bed nights. We've accessed the homes of 28 volunteers, and of the 80 unique youth that we've placed, 68 have moved on to supported or private accommodations, or have returned home, or have moved in with another family or natural support. And another really important stat is that about 2 in every 3 referrals that we receive are not eligible for Night Stop, but we support them as well. So since 2018, we have diverted 140 youth from sleeping rough, sleeping outdoors. So these are the successes. If you take a look on the left, on the slide there, it's a map of York Region. So the region that we serve is massive. And as someone who's worked on the front lines of this program and seen the impact that it's had in the community, it really makes a difference. So a lot of people ask, how do I get involved? We have a lot of people that want to get involved after hearing about Night Stop as a host volunteer, if they're living in Ontario, if they're living in York Region. And there's a lot of organizations that want to know how can we do Night Stop in our community. It's very simple. You could go to our website at nightstop.ca and we have an initial inquiry form. And after that, we will contact you within 2 business days and we can start discussing that. But yeah, the program is working. We've seen a massive difference, and when it's paired with family and natural support, the data suggests that, you know, it really gives young people a much better chance than, you know, the one-dimensional way we've kind of been looking at supporting youth homelessness in the past. So yeah, so I thank you for your time, and I look forward to questions if you have any, and I'll be around. And like I said, my personal email is there at 360 Kids. So if you have any questions, you could even reach out to me as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Tally. That's amazing. And to see your stats, even with that COVID hard stop and how you were able to come back from that. We'll move to question period or Q&A. We got about 15 minutes, so please put up your hand and we'll bring the mic over. We ask that you speak into the mic just for the recording and those that will be joining or viewing post.
Hi, I have actually like 2 questions. One is really quick. This here is amazing. And I know that, of course, in terms of youth getting into the program is a little limited, but I was wondering if there is a way around how agencies can actually like order this, like, right, like I run a transitional program and I would love for the youth to have something like this. Is there a way around that? So that's for you folks.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Want to come up here? Oh, no, there's one there.
Sean, can you put up your hand? You're Sean. Yeah. How do we order more My Guides? So Sean is our PI for the project and helps us get these printed and sent to places. So we can definitely take your information and make sure you get a bunch sent to your organization.
Yeah,
Nice.
Eva's Printing is a social enterprise based out of Eva's in Toronto. We're printing books.
Where?
Easily get
Eva's print
Oh,
shop.
Jonathan prints them.
Yes,
Okay.
Jonathan prints our stuff.
Cool. Yeah, we can get, like, if you can also share it and then we can pay to get it
We
printed
can also
as well.
come to Eva's with some more. We do our outreach.
Well, I'm not
so.
at Eva's anymore. I'm a Youth Link, but definitely.
We can
know
come there as well.
Jonathan. Okay, so that was that. And then for the night stop, I actually heard a little bit about it last night at the social. And I was like, oh my God, I love this. So that's why I had to come and see this. And my question is around the per diem, like the families, when they go stay with them, how much are we paying them for the night?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, that's a really good question. So our per diem is $30 a night, but different night stop providers can budget for what they feel that they need to allot in their community. Speaking on our volunteers personally, we have to force them to take it. So it becomes very challenging for us to get it out to them, and they often receive it and then donate it back to 360 Kids. That's been that's been our experience with it. But you know, if anyone that's doing Night Stop in their community, they have the flexibility to kind of build what fits into what they can budget for and what fits the needs for their community.
Okay. And then is there a fee associated with the accreditation through 360 for like the agencies to be able to do it?
Yeah, there is a fee. There's an annual fee, and it is in and around $3,200 per year. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're second. I'll just.
Hey, thanks for 3 fabulous presentations. Really fantastic. I'm so glad I chose this session. So for the Newfoundland Master Lease program, incredibly creative, really adjusting to the market. I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the relationship between yourselves as the tenant and then the young people as the subtenant. The nature of the agreement, is there a code of conduct? Are you focused more on rooms or apartments, like the physical environment that is being offered in the 10 facilities or so that you're managing now? Just a little bit of how the expectations that they may be having and so on, and give us a little more detail on that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess. There we go.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we kind of look more so at the rooms as opposed to the whole house. That's what we usually provide to the young people. In regards to rules and expectations, there really isn't any. Young people can be in active addictions, can be in active mental health. There's no real kind of criteria. The only thing that we do sign rental agreements that are kind of standardized. The reason because of that is to get young people accustomed to real-world environments of signing a rental agreement, understanding what it means. So there's no real kind of, these are what you must abide by. The only thing that we do have that, it's unfortunate, but we do have a no pet policy. Other than that, that's really and truly it. Young people can literally move in with the clothes on their back. We provide toiletries in regards to toilet paper, laundry detergent, dish detergent, again, to promote that life skills of, cleaning up after yourself. Things that they really wouldn't go out and buy themselves, we'll provide for so that they do. But we do have a referral bank for furniture. So if somebody moves in, we provide a bed and bedclothes. But if there's a furniture bank referral that we can hook them up with, that they can get furniture through that. So we really try to provide as much as we can and ask very little in return. Hopefully that answered it.
Thank you. My question's also for David. You were talking about the program being that that you have the Landlord and Tenancy Act that you have to follow. So we run a similar program, although ours is transitional, so we're sort of protected under the transitional housing area there. How do you work out, if you're actually renting from the landlord, are you not protected as the agency by the landlord and tenancy? And then how do you pass the rights of the tenancy on to that client? And then do you not have an issue of being long-term landlords for adults and no longer children if they stay?
Yeah, that's a great question in terms of, staying on. That's something we'd probably have to speak about. We haven't experienced that. Most of the youth we have, I don't think are close to the end of our age mandate, but it's something to think about because certainly so essentially we are the leaseholders and we're subletting to the youth, so they sign a lease as well. So that's where the Tenancy Act comes in for us. Like I said, it does come with some issue. I mean, we have to follow the Tenancy Act exactly like everyone else does. But like Greg said, it's a good introduction for the youth into that process, but it does come with some challenges for us because if there's an eviction, we have to follow the process there. They can then, we've had a case where they can, they challenge the eviction, so then we have to wait longer, and then we have to go to see the RTA. So yeah, it's like I said, it's not a perfect solution because it does cause there have been some cases, not very many, but a couple where there's been some frustration there for everybody living in the home because we've got to follow certain rules under the Tenancy Act. But as for the age one, that's a great question, and I don't have the answer to that one because we didn't actually think about it.
When you do, let's circle back.
Yeah.
But thank you very much, and congratulations.
I can speak a little bit to that. We do have a young person that's about 6 months currently right now, 8 to their 30th birthday. Oh, sorry. So that's one thing we're starting now with the staffing is looking at how do we transfer this young person to the adult system in regards to not being punitive that hey, you're turning 30, you've got to move out. It's how do we, and he's lived successfully in our house for a year. With actually a little over a year with no mental health issues, no concerns whatsoever. Prior to that was hospitalized multiple times. So it just goes to show that stability does create that mental health stability as well. So we're looking now with the 6 months turnaround time of gradually introducing that, okay, you've had the success, now let's move into something a little bit more permanent where, you can be with, because right now he's living with 22 and 23-year-olds. So trying to come at it from a strengths-based approach of you've done so well, how do we kind of gradually move you into that adult living situation? So we haven't come across it yet, but we're starting to, and it's going to be a very slow, supportive approach to that.
Wow, from all three of you, this was very enlightening. The province I come from is New Brunswick, and we actually only have one youth shelter in the entire province that serves youth from 16 to 18, and there's 6 beds. So I have questions for all of you, one of which I know 360, you mentioned you start at 16. Just curious from the other 2 organizations, what age you start supporting youth at?
We're 16 to 29.
Yeah, sorry, 16 to 29 is our age mandate.
For HOPSI, it's 16 to their 26th birthday, but our Loft Community Services, KMH, it ranges from various ages, so it's hard to say, but I've definitely worked with younger than 16 and older than 26, so.
Okay. And then specifically for St. John's, is the living arrangement co-ed, and how are you managing that demographic of what goes on right now within our demographic of everyone we're trying to support the right way?
Yeah, it is co-ed living. So, and like I said, we do have young people. Our average age is about 22, so we don't really have any 16-year-olds living in properties with 28-year-olds. If we do have some vacancies, we do kind of not gatekeep in a sense, but we do try to set up for success. So we do try to manage our properties in regards to who's currently living there, what their situations are, and looking at who's coming in and trying to match it appropriately. We don't ask people to move from house to house, but if there is a spot available, we do our best to manage that co-living situation. It is difficult at times. We do get kind of drawn into, oh, well, they did this or they did that, and it's like, we kind of go about it, okay, like, we'll try to be supportive, but it is that, you're living communally, you need to, like, this is a skill of how to live communally, how to work things out. If it becomes an issue, we do step in. Knock on wood, we haven't had a significant issue yet with that, thankfully. But I think by having staff in on a regular basis, that does kind of, stop things before they become, too out of hand. And that supportive piece is really good. Like, my staff are phenomenal with the rapport building and having those honest conversations, where they see the same staff coming in all the time. The house does see, that staff and can be very open and talk about things. And it's a lot of just having those open conversations and nipping it in the bud before it really gets out of hand.
Sorry, I'm not trying to monotonize the mic, but I'm also wondering, you mentioned earlier about separating the property management from the support systems, and I'm wondering if you've ever thought of bringing in individuals from a trades perspective in the community to actually teach the skills to the youth that are damaging on how to fix?
Well, we've done that, not directly with this program, but Greg mentioned earlier, we do have a impact construction, which is a social enterprise. So youth can get trained, go there, get trained, and then work for the construction company. So they do a lot of our repairs. Some of our youth work with impact, but we don't have a specific program where those youth that are staying in those homes are connected. But again, I'm learning a bit here today too. That's not a bad idea.
So, I guess,
No.
sorry, keep my talking. So with that though too, is that there is that life skills component embedded into it. So if somebody does, punch a hole in the wall, we do have patch kits. It's like red, green, if you're not handsome, you might as well be handy. So I teach them how to do those small patches, because again, it's one of those life skills of when you're living on your own, you don't want to be evicted or have to pay that damage deposit. So it's like, how can I fix this the cheapest, best way possible? So there is that kind of little bit that we do, and that's how we say to the landlords, like, anything minor we'll kind of look after, but it is that teaching component as well.
Two last quick things. One for Tally. Did the youth provide you reasons why they memorized the shifts? Is it because of trauma and need, like they've gotten turned away or forgotten on a list?
No, it's they learned that there was a wait list that they'd be placed on, and they were afraid that during the shift change, the wait list wouldn't be transferred over. That was their fear.
Okay.
So to ensure that that wouldn't happen, even though it wouldn't happen, they would call out every staff change to ensure that their name was still on the list.
Thank you for all the great work everyone is doing.
Two questions for David and Greg. One, I wasn't sure if you had mentioned if there was a length of stay, so if you can clarify that. And you talked about the different, that the government funded or the government units are cheaper. So do the youth pay different rents depending on where they live?
So I'll work backward. Yes, with the government-funded properties that we just recently have taken on, we've adjusted our kind of rental schematics so that it is very, again, how I mentioned earlier, it's like whatever we cover in rent, we also just add for the internet, and because we also provide internet for our young people as well, and the cleaning. So it's rent plus those add-on costs, and that's it. So some of our private markets, could be paying $700. Some of our government places could be paying considerably less. Again, it's the young people like, well, how come I'm paying less? So that's why we're trying to move to the government-funded property so that it's equal across the board. What was the first question? Length of stay. We did try to look at about a 3 month kind of length of stay. Realistically, like I said, we do have young people living in the properties for over a year. So how we kind of manage that is, when somebody first moves in, the level of support is pretty high. As, within that time frame, their independence kind of grows and our level of involvement decreases. So, both my staff take on a 1 to 30 case ratio. So we've got 60 young people between our private market and our own housing stock. So, they're like, how do I manage that? Well, as people become stabilized, your level of engagement is less. So that's how we kind of manage it. So people that are living, in our properties for a length of time, we then provide landlord references when they move out. We do a lot of work trying to get young people to move into private market. The unfortunate thing is there is no private market to move them into. And that's something we're seeing across the board in Newfoundland, is that our shelter stays have gone from like 9 to 10 days to upwards of 6, 7 months because there's nowhere to go. So therefore our supported living or our semi-supported living, which, realistically could be shorter periods of time, have increased dramatically because there is no private market to go into. So everybody's kind of in that stagnant phase right now. In better times, we would like to have that turnover a little bit more to kind of have them stabilized, get used to paying rent, and have that rental reference that we could provide and take them on. But unfortunately, we're stuck right now.
Yeah, we got 5 more minutes. We must have finished a bit early.
Hello. I'm with Province of Nova Scotia Community Services, and my question's kind of for Tally, but maybe for Greg and David as well. Just wondering if you've noticed a theme in, are there youth connected to child welfare, like are social workers calling you for Night Stop? And kind of similar, I guess, being 22, probably aging out of care, but I'm just wondering if you see a theme, not that it has to be eligibility-wise, but is that something that care experienced youth are utilizing your awesome programs?
Yeah, I would say it's not a common thread in the youth that are being referred. Are we talking about Children's Aid? And yeah, no, it's not a common thread. We have worked in collaboration with Children's Aid, but predominantly it's young people with breakdowns in the home. But no, and the other truth is that there may be, but we might not know. Right, because the referral might be coming, it might be a self-referral from a youth and they might not disclose, but it hasn't been a common thread, no.
Our experience is a little bit different because we actually do have some formalized agreements with CSSD, so we do have youth that are exiting care that we work with Greg's, another part of Greg's program, supporting youth with transition. So we are actually contracted to work directly with those youth as they're coming out of care. But we are seeing, the statistics are there that if you're involved in care, there's a good chance that you're going to, have some experience of homelessness. So we do see quite a few of our clients exiting care, but that's one of the reasons we set up the formalized system. It's not all of our programs aren't that way, but we do have some spaces that are specifically for youth exiting care that CSSD can refer into our programs.
Is that it? Yeah, there's room for, I was going to say one more, and if not, I'll ask it.
Yeah, mine is more of a statement and an offer to, I think, Craig and David. What you guys are doing is amazing. I do have a lot of experience in head leasing and all those type of relationships in the different forms, and I'm more than happy to connect with you guys to kind of talk about the different options, because there's also, as I hear you guys model more, it sounds more like it's a transitional model, and there's ways in how you can give the youth all the tenets of the RTA without it actually being under the RTA, right? So I'm more than happy to connect, because there is an organizational risk when there is a tenancy agreement under the Residential Tenancy Act, and there's ways in how you can do it, and everybody's a win-win, right? Yeah. Because right now, it sounds like if you try to tell a youth to move out, they can actually refuse not to move out because they have an RTA agreement with you. Yeah,
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to contact.
okay.
Connect, sorry.
Bi-directional learning, fantastic. Thank you for sharing. I know we're tight on time, but I just wanted to ask one question when we look at Housing First for Youth or quality programming as one of those key components, and I think you all briefly touched on it, is that cultural complexity and the need for that. How do you have that in each of those programs and answer that youth voice and choice in that area? Those cultural supports. And I'm going to hold you to like 30 seconds each.
I'll take a stab at that.
Yeah,
I
thank you.
think when it comes to the By Youth for Youth project, our context really starts with our geography. And because we're in Toronto, we have an inherent diversity available to us. So I feel like the young people do see themselves in our staff and in our team. However, the real linking factor in terms of culture is like being in Toronto and everything that comes with that, unfortunately. And sometimes it's okay to separate those things because intersectionality does also include where you live and how you came to live there.
Yeah, we try to have as diverse a volunteer roster as possible, so that if youth want to stay with a host family that is similar in terms of culture or ethnicity, we do our best to make that possible. We also try to have as diverse a roster as possible so that if the youth doesn't want that, we can also provide that. So we do it the best we can. And I think as well, geography. We try to keep the youth as close to their community as possible and if it's safe for them, so that the successful networks in their lives stay in place while they're in our program.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'd kind of mirror what everyone else has said. Some of the other things we've done, I'll give one specific example, is we've partnered with other organizations. So currently we have a partnership with Quadrangle, which is the 2S LGBTQ plus support, because we said, why would we come up with our own program when there's somebody already doing this great work? So we partnered with them. We support a staff that works kind of both with our organization and their organization. So we really try to approach it from who has the expertise in the community and can we partner with them to kind of meet the needs of our youth.
Thank you. And thank you all for staying, and I wish you all safe travels wherever they lead you later today. And again, I hope you find some healing in the water of Halifax. Take care.